Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good evening to all of the audience and panelists with me here on stage. My name is Muhammad Shafie bin Muhammad Shafizal. I'm the chairman of Ikram Muslim Malaysia, and I'll be hosting today's very interesting, factual, and of course very awesome forum titled "Is Peer Pressure Life Threatening?" Today, I am accompanied by these four very humble and intelligent gentlemen, Mr. Muhammad Irfan bin Muhammad Nazri, a psychologist, Mr. Nagulan Anak Lelaki Ganesan, who is a school counselor, Mr. Muhammad Shamil Hilman bin Rashidan, who is a parent, and lastly, Mr. Zong Zishin, a student, who will all together with me discuss about this topic and give each other's views and opinion professionally. Peer pressure is the influence wielded by people within the same social group. It is also the term used to describe the effect of this influence has on a person to conform in order to be accepted by the group. Often, peers are thought of as friends, but peers can be anyone of similar status, such as people who are the same age, who have the same abilities, and who share a social status. The feeling that one must do the same things as other people's of one's age and social group to be liked or respected by them. It is reported that 90% of teens experience peer pressure, while 40% of them reported that their social status boosts up after they gave in to peer pressure. The purpose of today's forum is for you guys, our beloved audience and all layers of society, to be alerted and understand about this topic and how we as civilized society should react to peer pressure. Alright, with that being said, I want to ask our first panelist, Mr. Muhammad Ifan bin Muhammad Nazri. As a psychologist, do you agree with the title of this forum?
Well, thank you, Mr. Shafii, for the question. Well, there are loads of studies and researches that I've done and read about peer pressure throughout my career as a psychologist for 12 years. So, generally speaking, I strongly believe that peer pressure is not life-threatening. If you look back at our childhood or maybe high school, the experience that we had during that time is what make us who we are right now. Those things are crucial to develop one's character. So my short answer is no, it is not life threatening.
That's true. I believe your statements. In fact, I think that experience is what makes who I am today. Also, Mr. Ifan, I've also read some articles that said positive peer pressure is when it creates positive competition around teens toward improve themselves. Could you explain that?
So before I answer your question, let me explain briefly about peer pressure. So peer pressure can be divided into two types. One is positive peer pressure and another one is negative peer pressure. The main focus right now is positive peer pressure, since healthy competition gives a good impact in one's life. Based on one of the studies that I've done regarding peer pressure in teens concludes that teenagers are more likely to be influenced by his or her friends or colleagues than his family since they spend more time with them. So let me ask you, Mr. Shafi, have you had
Yes.
a friend who always wanted to be more than you? Maybe in terms of knowledge, performance, or maybe styling?
I think yes, I've encountered some of them. Yep.
Yeah, this is what we call as a peer pressure. Although although it may be annoying, but both of you play a role in developing each other's character. For instance, two high school football strikers are working on their shooting skills. At the end of the week, a coach needs to choose one of them for the next friendly. What would you think would happen? Of course, they'll compete and motivate each other during the training session. Although only one of them will be picked, the skills will still be developed. At the end of the day, the two strikers are not the same player as they were before. Same goes to the other aspect, the academics, volunteering, sports, and many more. This is how peer pressure plays a role in creating healthy competition. Well, to conclude, as a psychologist, I'm fully aware about our current issues that are happening in our country. A bully case, teenager who does drugs, and the newest one, a boy who robbed the mosque fund. This is what we call as negative peer pressure. Although it may seem terrible, This is just a tip of the iceberg. They were all viral due to their seriousness. As a matter of fact, we experience peer pressure every day in our daily life. It is just if we recognize it or not, and how we perceive and respond to the pressure. That is all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Irfan, for the very interesting input and it explained very clearly. I hope our audience can grasp your opinion politely. Next, Mr. Nagulan, School Chancellor. You've been working around high school students almost every day. Based on your observation and experience, do you agree that peer pressure endangers lives?
Thank you, Mr. Shafie. So, as a school counselor, without any doubt, I strongly agree with today's discussion, which is peer pressure is really life-threatening, especially among the teenagers. I'm not going to ignore the fact that there are some benefit that we're able to gain from the peer pressure, as what Mr. Irfan mentioned just now. But when we talk about teenagers, the negative peer pressure is dominant compared to the positive effect. Peer pressure tends to grow in intensity as a student move up through the grades. By the time they reach high school, fitting in has become a priority and often a source of anxiety and too many. Based on my experience, peer pressure can be manifested in any number of ways. It's typically focused in few common areas, which is frequently I encounter this kind of cases in my surveys. Firstly, allow me to share about the drug and alcohol, which is the most common habit that came from the negative peer pressure. Drug and alcohol can easily find on both college and high school campus, and teens might feel the pressure to be cool by experimenting with something exotic and daring. When our school tests were survived about the drug use, 55% said they start using the drug after being pressured by their friends. By giving in to the peer pressure to consume drug and alcohol can quickly land a person far in our their head, leading to even worse decision. Stealing also maybe it can happen on a dare, a challenge to do this or you are not one of us. Or basically boys are well known this kind of phrases. Do this if you have balls. Stealing can have an immediate impact actually, including strong feeling of remorse once their rush of adrenaline with of over time, guilt for worries about getting caught or concern about the possible damage to their reputation are some of the negative thought a person may experience after stealing. Sexual activity, seeing friends or hooking up can make it seem as thought sex is what everyone does. A common activity that is not a big deal here. The perception can easily lead a person to attempt down their misgiving or excitation and go further than they want to with a sexual partner. This pressure often begins in high school or even earlier. Studies have shown that 33% of teenage boys felt pressure to have sex, while 23% of girls in the same age group felt the same way. It can be taught to put on the brake in the heat of the moment. But in addition to making a person feel uneasy about crossing their personal boundaries, having sex under pressure often means having sex without thinking it through or planning for it. That can lead to a serious consequence, such as sexually transmitted infection like HIV or pregnancy. One of the most important areas where peer pressure leads to regret is sex, for your information. It may seem like everyone is hooking up, but statistics show that many fewer young adults have hooked up sex than you might think. Bullying, also, most people likely do not think of themselves as a bullies. But the playground precursor is just one version of a bully. And bullying behavior can be developed in a small doses. If a group of friends begin to bully someone else, cheering other on, it can lead to a conundrum or confuse for the student who recognize what is happening around him. If they are stand aside and resist taking part, they may be treated as an outcast. But if they are to join in, they will face in the negative feeling combined by becoming a bully themselves.
All right, from
So
what
yeah,
I
that's
heard, All right, from what I heard just now from Mr. Nagolan, he pointed out one by one society problems were rooted from peer pressure. I can see that. Will you further explain your opinion, because as we hear from Mr. Ifan, that is not entirely the case.
Sure, Mr. Shafie. As we know that peer pressure is not unique to any group of people, nor is any more immune. It starts at a very young age. Imagine a toddler being singled out for not sharing their favorite toy and continues to evolve into more complex manifestation. It may be the goading to effort just on par of a cigarette in high school, or the college student who has a drink thrust into their hand at any party. It also affects adults who may feel that they have to attend a monthly lunch date to please their friends or earn more money to compare favorably with their neighbors. Those who believe they don't experience any peer pressure, no matter negative or positive peer pressure, likely don't see the bigger picture around them. Peer pressure can be entirely silent, but yet still overt, such as the billboard that make it clear of a good life include a new car or the magazine ad that suggests a model-like physical appearance start with a particular brand or moisturizer. The media is expert to recognizing people's desire to fit in and exploiting that desire for financial gain. While it is difficult to resist the peer pressure, a key step is recognizing what type of peer pressure is being used here. So that is what I want to try to convey my ideas. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Nagulan, for your views and argument. It was analytical also. I hope all of us can see these issues from the bigger picture and bigger scope, so we can further understand how seriousness this peer pressure affect our society. Move on to our third panelist, Mr. Muhammad Shamil Hilman bin Rashidan, who is a parent. So, Mr. Shamil, as a parent, you've raised your kids from an infant to teenagers they are now. From what you observe of their character development, do you think peer pressure is life-threatening?
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Shafie. So as a parent, I will share my opinion based on my point of view on raising teenagers. So in my opinion, peer pressure is not life-threatening. I believe that it is a learning process for teenagers that allows them to make their own decisions and discover who they are. So other than that, peer pressure has a lot of positive aspects that can be beneficial in the lives of teenagers and their friends.
I I'm convinced you must be a really cool parent, Mr. Shamil, as you let your kids to develop their character themselves with your guidance. But can you explain and elaborate to us the relevancy of your answer?
Okay, sure, Mr. Shafii. Alright, so peer pressure may be really beneficial. It can inspire teenagers to accomplish something they will not otherwise have the strength or motivation to do. It can also help them in making a decision. Peer pressure also makes it easier for teenagers to understand their choices. So the audience might be wondering how peer pressure might be beneficial. So peer pressure, on the other hand, isn't only about teens pushing one another to take risks or participate in risky behavior. Peer pressure has a lot of positive aspects, and it may be a beneficial factor in the life of your kid and their friends. So when someone's peer urge them to do something good or growth oriented, this is known as a positive peer pressure. Same as what Mr. Ifran have explained to us just now about the positive side of peer pressure, such as peers who are dedicated to succeeding in school or sports might inspire others to be more goal oriented. So similarly, peers who are nice, loyal, or supportive inspire others to be the same too. So unlike adults who will generally act similarly whether alone or in a group, teenagers are more capable of influencing a crowd of their friends. They are unconsciously turning to their friends for guidance on how to act and interact with others as they learn about their social place and identity. So actually advice from a peer is often more influential to a teenager than advice from an adult.
Right. We already hear about the negative side of peer pressure from Mr. Nagulan. Since you are a parent, are there any ways on how to counteract this negative peer pressure, and how can we encourage teenagers or everyone else to use positive peer pressure
Yes, Mr.
according to your explanation just now? Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Shafie, thank you for the question. So I do agree that peer pressure has its own negative side, just like what Mr. Naglun has explained just now, such as taking drugs, alcohol, or have an underage sex, and many more. And yes, we actually can counteract the negative peer pressure. There is actually a technique that we call as normative strategy. So this normative technique is having an open and honest discussion regarding your teen's perspective about the prevalence of dangerous behavior or what he or she believes is happening versus what is actually happening. So by allowing the teenagers to learn their reality about how frequently teens avoid these risky choices may reassure them that they are not alone, which is something they absolutely need to hear. So according to studies, adolescents make better choices for themselves when their parents stay active in their lives. So for the second question, how might others be encouraged to practice positive prevention? So it is important to make them understand that every behavior has an influential effect on others. This will make them more aware of the fact of their friends influence them and how they influence their friends in the same way. They will be able to make a better decision in life and in the same way help their friends who are in need. Also, we as a parents actually may dislike some of their habits developed by your kids due to the influences of other kids. Instead of forcing them to get rid of those friends, we as a parents actually should have a nice talk with them about what kind of friends they want to have in their life. We need to talk to them about the values of a good friendship and how friends lift each other up. By this, they will encourage them to demonstrate a good relationship with friends and classmates, and at the same time, they will seek out friends with the similar qualities. So I think these are the some ways for us parents can do to develop a positive preparation among teenagers. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Shafi'i.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shamil, for your explanation. Yes, I agree. We as a parent shouldn't control our kids 100%. We should encourage them to develop their own character with our guidance. That will make the character development more efficient and not toxic. Yeah, it's good lah for our health. Next is for our last panelist. Mr. Zong Zixin, who is actually a student. Of course, we also need the view from the teens and students also. So Song, do you think peer pressure is life-threatening?
I partially like that. Peer pressure is actually life-threatening and it depends on the severity of peer pressure. While many believe that peer pressure may bring entirely negative circumstances, especially in teens, while some of the advantages are often being neglected. I personally believe that peer pressure has its pros and cons. However, I would like to stress the fact that peer pressure often brings about more negative than positive circumstances in this modern materialistic society. Thus, I would like to stress the negative aspects of peer pressure because they are much more significant. So personally, I believe that peer pressure may be associated with academic decline. This is due to the fact that peer pressure may be confusing and misleading as well, often causing their victims to become distracted from their prominent tasks in life such as academics. Peer pressure will gradually shape the victims into becoming the smart to be cool or the cool to be smart type. This is mainly because the victims often being fear labeled as nerds, failing to notice that their primary responsibility is still to excel in academics. Their motivation to excel in academics may be gradually morphed into learning to become awesome. Therefore, they may not work as hard as they used to be and forego the educational investment opportunities for fear of how they will be perceived by their classmates. This may affect their career choices, potentially causing them to become unemployed, affecting their life with grave consequences. So with that, I would like to share something which I have gone through personally. So a few years ago, whilst I was still a high school student, everything was going well initially. At first, I had excellent grades, was a top-notch student in the class. However, the things soon became spooky when I began blending in with a large crowd of friends who were the typical cool guys. They would tell me things like studying is for the lackluster, and they talked me into playing electronic games. I started skipping classes with them, and eventually my academic performance plunged into a sharp decline. In my mind, all that existed was the intention to stay cool and awesome. But luckily, my educator immediately marked this as the effect of peer pressure, and they advised me to leave the group of friends immediately. I tried adhering to her advice, and I was the top notch again. This experience actually taught me how peer pressure may exert such a massive influence on one's academic performance, and I always keep that in mind till now.
Million thanks for your sharing, Mr. Songs. He even shared his own experience in life about being peer pressured. I believe that is also serve as a shout out to me as to why peer pressure is so dangerous at times. However, I believe the academical decline may not be the sole reason why peer pressure is life threatening. Song, do you have any other valuable experience or other reasons which may explain why peer pressure is so dangerous, such as the ones based on your research in some trusted blogs or sites, to explain why peer pressure is so hazardous?
Sure, Mr. Shafie. So one thing that may actually explain why peer pressure is so hazardous is basically the fact that it may be associated with potential suicidal ideation in some cases. So in this context, we're talking about the negative effects that may potentially harm one's mental health, so extreme that it leads to them compromising their physical health. Peer pressure is often associated with a phenomenon known as the identity shift effect. Psychiatrists often describe this as the failure of maintaining their self-identity. It is a situation where the affected victims does social comparison and puts a large effort into conforming with the group standards. This may cause them to shift from their natural or pre-existing way of life. Victims may try numerously to become intimate with their social friends, forcing themselves into doing things they are not even fond of. This is extremely lethargic to one point, as one may not be able to cope with the tension of trying to hold up to their peers' standards over time. This will lead to mental health issues and finally suicidal ideation. Besides all the points which I have mentioned, I also believe that peer pressure is also dangerous because it causes potential involvement in criminal offenses. According to the differential dissociation theory, friends usually shape each other's behavior primarily through the transmission of values, behavioral models, as well as the social reinforcements. Individuals can learn behavior by observing and imitating others via the social interaction with each others. So with that, I would like to share an actual experience of a blogger who has gone through such a situation. The blogger, which is Alison, mentioned that she started doing drugs when she was 15. She thought that it was fine because her friends in her neighborhood were into it, but in the end she was caught, sent to the rehab, and even after successfully completing the treatment, jobs are hard to find due to her criminal record. Now she lives a life with less than a few bucks as a worker in a convenience store. Through her personal experience, I realized how dangerous peer pressure is in baiting one into criminal offenses. Alison obviously knew doing drugs was wrong, but because all her friends in her neighborhood did it, she thought it was fine. This explains that peer pressure may lead to potential involvement in criminal offenses, and these criminal offenses are so life-threatening that they may destroy one's future because once you have a criminal record, it is quite hard for you to seek financial stability in life. And I think that's all from me. Back to Mr. Shafie.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Song, for your sharing of your personal experience and this blogger's experience. Now I can see clearly how it can affect our lives. Uh, Also, thank you for being the representative for the teenagers on how you guys see these issues boggling around in your lives as a teenager and students. Next, I want to give my own conclusion for this forum. Um, Yes, we have very informative and interesting panelist views today, but I'm sure every person here already has their own point of view on peer pressure, and I'm not against any of that because it is still wandering around our society for a long time and continuing, I believe. From what we have heard from our panelists, peer pressure can have multiple effects on individuals. Can be bad, can be good, depending on how those individuals react to peer pressure. Lastly, what I hope that you, the audience, can harness from today's discussion is we need to accept that peer pressure does exist in our society and it will not just disappear overnight. It is a natural thing experienced by all levels of society. We just need to be smart to react to it and control it. Don't ignore its existence and let yourself be consumed by it. That's all from us. Thank you so much.